Welcome to the Mailtime Podcast. I'm joined today by Tzur Goldin, twin brother of Hadar Goldin, Hashem Yikom Damo, whose body was held by Hamas for over 11 years, was returned this past November. Tzur, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward for this talk.
What's life like been now that Hadar's body has been returned? Do you even remember what it was like to be going about your life without this horrendous ordeal?
Well, it's a new life. I feel it's a rebirth. We've been in this campaign for over 11 years, and it takes time to adapt back. We've been spending our time struggling, pioneering, advocating, fighting in every way you can imagine. And that spirit is still inside, but reality has changed. There's a great relief and high hopes for the future when we reflect on the period, which was most of the times very, very hard, very disappointing. But most importantly, the result, which we feel very strongly, is hope for Israel, hope for our values, and belief of our courage and abilities.
What would you say is the biggest takeaway and lesson that your family learned throughout these 11 years?
Well, first and foremost is it turns out our values are also our long-term strategy, especially when we are confronting a value strategy opponent like Hamas, like radical Islam. When you stick to your own values, which are holding up to this land of Israel, which is fighting for our survival, but most importantly, not leaving anyone behind. When you stick on it, when you fight on it, when you tag it as a price, not that you would pay for it, but your enemy should pay the highest of prices if they hold it. When you send strong messages of how hard you believe in your values, you're able to achieve victory in any means. So this is basically very simple. Now we all understand it, but this case was very, very much different before October 7th, when for about 9 years since my brother's abduction, we were one of a few who saw the misconceptions that were leading Israeli governments throughout the years towards Hamas. We've seen it through the lens of hostages, hostage affairs. That's where I spent all my, let's say, most of my adult life advocating for. But it seemed then a narrow lens, but this lens became a very, very defining one after October 7th, and to my belief, our future.
After October 7th, did you find yourself in a almost comforting position in the sense that people who are now unfortunately joining your family and advocating for hostage return, they kind of turn to you as the person with experience with this?
I wouldn't use the term comforting, but it was the only relief was the release of isolation that we've experienced and had to deal with before, which was unbearable, especially when you're dealing with a situation where you need to defend your family and you need to sort of fight for the interest of your loved one. But definitely, we were in a completely different situation. It wasn't only spiritually or in context of what you feel. It was deeply on the ground in facts. In fact, as a matter of fact, ever since 2014, when my brother was abducted, we have established two big organizations, one in Israel, which was a headquarters for our sons, that's how we called it, which formed a basis for two main organizations that led the advocacy in the public space. But more importantly, it was our professional teams that worked in DC, in New York, and our foundation, and also the professional teams in Israel who advocated voluntarily. And as part of our advocacy, they drafted in October 7th. So there were people high ranked in the IDF, in Shin Bet, even the Mossad, people who had key roles in government, who didn't like policy, found themselves out, and suddenly in October 7, found himself back in decisive positions. In terms of the other families also, the language we spoke, the advocacy we used, the strategy and reporting that we had, they actually became mainstream after October 7, when a lot of research, study, and action wasn't really on the table. So these were the first to look at, and happily a lot of the conclusions were taken seriously in this operation.
What's one thing you think the public doesn't understand about your family's struggle over these 11 years? Obviously, your father wrote a very powerful essay in Tablet magazine shortly after October 7th, which I look back on quite frequently, detailing some of your family's struggle, whether that was the COVID vaccine or whether that was different policies when it came to acting in Gaza. But what do you think there is that hasn't really been told yet that is of interest to the general public?
I think this is we were operating, and now we're also operating always in a mystifying sort of environment where you don't really understand how your interests are promoted as an Israeli nation, and how politics unravel and certain things work out. I think the most important thing that people should learn and understand, that hostages and a fight for hostages, struggle for hostages, in fact, not a problem, but a key to solve the situation, whether it's in Gaza now. Thank God we're not in a situation where we have active hostages in Gaza. We do have several hostages elsewhere who historically need to be brought back. But in terms of Gaza and Israel, the key insight here is to see that you had an opponent. Hamas still exists. There's still a confrontation. Had an opponent who held hostages, and the key way to deal with him was creating deterrence towards the obtainment of hostages. Deterrence in the military IDF and also the U.S. military, very similar definition, says that you are deterring your opponent, especially in terrorism, when you make them believe that they pay a higher price if they choose to act in terrorism towards you, rather than the price that they actually gain. So there was a very, very specific, very clear equation that Hamas has said to us from the Shalit period, Shalit hostage affair, and until October 7, where they obtain a hostage, they kidnap, they take captive. It's an asset for them, and we, the Israeli society, pay a price. Okay, pay high prices in terms of releasing convicted terrorists and creating a security issue, and also putting us in through the dilemma that we either jeopardize our security or we jeopardize our own soul and values in a moral felony of abandoning our loved ones. Most importantly, in a lot of cases, in the case of my brother, an IDF soldier who fought in the front line. So this dilemma that Hamas has said to us was a dilemma that Israel complied. That's the language that Israel spoke. The one very bright issue that was outspoken is the release of terrorists. But the other side, which was very harsh and more important, was the abandoning. So if you play towards this language, then you completely lose. Society breaks apart. We fight against each other. But the key issue was flipping the key solution was flipping the equation of when a terrorist organization obtains or take a hostage, that turns into a burden rather than an asset. And rather than we pay the price as the sort of the target, the Israelis, Hamas should pay the price and pay unproportionate price. And then not only that you sort of dismantle this method, you also create deterrence. So when there's a strong message sent, and I'll put it in a very, very common and clear way, that we have an insane type of people, the Jewish nation, the Israeli society, who do not accept this method of hostage taking and are willing to bring to a situation where a terrorist organization pays the highest of status. And in Arabic, we say majnun, we also say majnun. Like when you feel this overwhelming attack, once you choose this method, this is how it works. And actually, when you reflect upon the period, I call it protective edge periods. 2014 is the year when my brother was killed and kidnapped until October 7th. So when you reflect on the period where the results, so there was no result of retrieving hostages, but most importantly, there was an escalation. So we transitioned from a situation where we had 4 hostages to a situation where we have 255 hostages. Okay, and so it was from a hostage issue to a hostage crisis. Not also speaking about whatever happened. So a trend happened here. Okay, so something happened. Something caused Hamas to believe in this message, to educate a new generation. 10 years is the generation of high school people who became the Nukhba terrorists who executed October 7th and onwards. So this equation is not merely, a narrow, marginal sort of interest or, let's say, technique or method. It's a core strategy that should be learned. And I'm afraid that now that I hear about the aftermath and all the conclusions of this war, again, there's a streaming of the same debate, the same talk about hostages, about narrowing it down to terrorists. Okay, just I'll give to release of terrorists, whether we should release them or not. This is the language of that Hamas, and I hope I was clear enough, sort of explaining this so far. But the language that Hamas sets to Israel was, we take you pay the price, and you're in the dilemma. Okay, what needs to be done, and the message that should be sent, and what our brave soldiers, the IDF soldiers, I think all Israeli society has been up to throughout these 2 years of war from October 7, is setting a new equation and saying, you choose this method, you will pay the price. The best example or sort of feedback I received was from Nukhba terrorists themselves. I can't explain how this really happened. A lot of still classified, but I was in part of a study that was accepted by more than one institution. I actually received allowance to ask away from people who interrogate terrorists of Nukhba, to ask them, what do they think? Specifically, there were terrorists who weren't released, right? It was in the aftermath of October 2020. Very disappointed not to be released, not to be brought back. But across the board, the overall response was, we miscalculated this attack. We miscalculated this issue of obtaining hostages, because look at the price that we paid. And they play with sort of the numbers. Some are false, some are not, some are propaganda, some are not. So this is only one indication, but I think the best indication is what we saw, okay? Is what we saw, a situation where for 9 years, and I'm still talking about my incident and in my experience, for 9 years, the Israeli government had a strategy to sort of reduce the value of hostage, to put them aside. And this was hand to hand with what I call the appeasement of Hamas, or what I call the strategy or the glorification of silence, okay, towards Hamas. These two sort of strategies work together to create the situation, and this brought to a situation where there are 255. I want to give another three interesting examples of Hamas educating their new generation of Nukhba to take hostage. So Israeli governments took the strategy up to October 7 to sort of set aside and not put on the table the issue of hostages anywhere, in sort of hopes that it will bring to a decreased price that Israel got paid. Fact is that over 1,000 Hamas-affiliated terrorists were released from Israeli prisons from the year 2014 until October 7. So this is one collapse of the agenda. Some were for legal reason, some were because they were assets that could have created other satisfy other interests. But most especially when you look to the education and culture within Gaza, 2 years after my brother was abducted, and this was famous throughout the late war, because in the city of Gaza, Hamas created a big monument with a hand holding the diskiot. I don't know how to say it in English.
Dog tag.
The dog tags of my brother Hadar and Oron Shaul, the other soldier who was obtained hostage. So, and only, I think, 6 months into the war, after October 7, IDF Golani Brigade came in, which was the brigade of Oron Shaul, so it was a very symbolic act where they broke this apart. But this, think of being an average Gazan civilian walking through this monument every day, glorifying the act of hostage taking.
Do you remember, by the way, when you first saw that monument erected? You know, your Hadar's brother. What are you thinking when you see it?
Of course, it was for once. It was an act of intimidation towards my family, my mother primarily. You know, my mother, my father. It was also accompanied with propaganda, with videos. The target at us, the family, is part of Hamas psychological warfare. But this is only just example. So we felt attacked, and then we felt left behind. we always receive those sort of fake reassurances that it's okay. It's not something meaningful. It only concerns one or two cases. Okay. The second one was case was, and I don't know how much time we have. The second case was immediately before October 7th, so December 2022. Yahya Sinwar, the great orchestrator of October 7th, a leader of Hamas, who was had a special affiliation towards hostage taking. He held a 35-year annual event, an annual event that commemorated 35 years since the establishment of Hamas. So this was a big event. Over 20K people arrived. It was the center of center square within Gaza. And Yahya Sinwar stands there and he says in his own words, this was less than 10 months before October 7th. He says, hey, we're going to bring the big flood towards Israel. Flood is for people who don't know, was the name that Hamas named October 7th event. It's their flood. It's the flood against Israelis. So he spoke about it 10 months before October 7th. And this was not a tiny event. This was, and this was broadcasted everywhere. Just wasn't within the focus of anyone except people like me who looked at it. The second thing he did, he brought the key spokesman. They're all now assassinated already. We're all assassinated. But he came with my brother Hadar's rifle. He held it up. He said,
Abu Abeda?
I don't know if it was specifically better because
the face is covered.
Was covered. Right. You can see this online. He held, this is the rifle of Hadar Goldin. I turned to Hadar Goldin's mother. There will be hundreds of Hadar Goldins. So this is what he says. So this goes, in the core of Hamas strategy, okay, of sort of absorbing the appeasement. And I can go on this. Follow towards this period, Israel held 2 full capacity without troops on the ground, but full operations in Gaza. One was Breaking Dawn, the second was Shield and Arrow, which Israel deliberately, the Israeli government, okay, deliberately framed this as an operation against jihadic Islam. It wasn't against Hamas. It was jihadic Islam. So
in fact, I think Hamas even gave up some of the people. I think Hamas actually kind of tricked Israel by actually giving some targets.
So this is part of what they say. So this is part of the scene. This is part of the trick. This is part of a sort of, we need to reflect about this mislead and look how they actually managed to trick us. A third example that concerns my brother is, of course, the obtainment, hostage taking in Nachalos of Nimrod Cohen, one of the IDF hostages. And there's a video that the family allowed to release a little late throughout the war. I think after a year throughout the war. And you see the terrorists shout and chant the name Hadar Goldin, Hadar Goldin. Okay. So the key question is not why is this soldier taken hostage? And the question is, why are these people celebrating, together with celebrating death to the Jews, they're celebrating Hadar Goldin? Why is this person became a key of victory? The only explanation to that is a trend, a very systematic trend, where this generation of Nukhbas, 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds who invaded Israel with their dogmated vow to take hostages, okay, to take hostage because they were fed with this. So, okay, so in short, I think the strongest message that should be learned from the Goldin family is our strategy is our values, and we're fighting against an enemy, a radicalist Islamic enemy who fights with their values. And when you stand up to your values and show them that they pay a price when they challenge your values, you will achieve a lot further. And this is not only an educational or cultural sort of vector that we need to lead towards. This is also an operational, strategic policy mindset that we should use towards Hamas, and there were endless opportunities to bring, before October 7th, endless opportunities to bring hostages back and causing Hamas pay the price. Okay?
I want to ask you, knowing what you know now, how should Israel and the IDF have responded immediately after your brother was kidnapped?
Okay, so thank you for asking it. This is a key issue. The key issue, if you want to three I don't know, general principles that you will need to look at. I think the first would be never, ever finish a war or an operation when you have a hostage left behind. Okay? Because what happened in my brother's case, in Operation of Protective Edge 2014, Hadar was kidnapped, was taken hostage together with Oron Shol in August 2014. And in August 27 or 28, I can't recall specifically the date, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but there was a Cairo agreement, like the Cairo agreement of this war, okay, where the Israeli hostages were off the table. They weren't even included as a post-war arrangement or a post-war memorandum, memo to work on. So this is first and foremost. And actually, well, my brother, just to remind anyone listening, was brought back only more than 1 month after the Cairo agreement in October 2025, the Trump orchestrated agreement. So we were deeply concerned with a situation where history will repeat itself, because the war has sort of ended. The sword has been raised from their Hamas's necks. We were terrified that we will repeat a situation where you end the war or an operation without retrieving all your hostages. Because this is let's say, I think the most clearest message to the enemy that they can repeat using hostage taking. So fortunately, a lot because of the extremely supportive attitude of the Trump administration and the setting that we received a situation where the aftermath or the closeness of aftermath of the war achieved the result of all hostages being brought back. Okay, so this is, I think, a key lesson. Never, ever end a conflict with hostages being brought back. Okay, there are also other, but I think looking at the situation and the equation that you want to set for enemies, and this is also, I think, in this context, this is also a very good lesson to talk about the demonstrations of Israelis throughout the war to retrieve the hostages. And I must say, and regardless of any political view or ever, a huge demonstration of Israelis calling for the release of hostages and linking the war results to the hostages systematically towards Hamas helped send this message that they pay a price. Yeah, they pay an unproportionate price for holding hostages, sending them actively, constantly. When they receive this signal that they're now collapsing because of this issue, they will think twice if to do it all over again. Okay.
And you talk about moral felonies. You talked about moral felonies before in terms of the Israeli view and how they dealt with the issue before October 7th, certainly. Do you feel confident that the majority or a strong majority of Israeli leaders in the IDF and in that are interested in being political leaders understand the doctrine that you're laying out?
I'm not sure. I think it will take time to adapt. I am confident that this will become, and we were also working very hard together with very good people to create this as a legacy and as a key sort of policy strategy to be understood, to be taken. Listen, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers, of civilians who felt the gravity of this war. A lot of people who advocated and pioneered in every way they found to reach good results in this war. I think there's a strong, proud legacy concerning the hostages. Okay, and I know there's a political debate and there's a lot of cynical talk towards it. Nowadays, you also see some families of hostage members going to politics, working on the near elections. But setting that aside, the fact that our brave soldiers brought back all the hostages, that we all fought for them, we all felt them closely. This is a heritage that I think all the new generations can learn from and be proud of. And so I'm confident we learned the lesson. Now the issue is to sort of push away the old sort of language and old sort of talk that is really playing to the hands of terrorist organizations.
I think everyone can unite around that. And we've done a very good job in this interview of avoiding any of the politics. I don't enjoy trying to drag in all sorts of different players because over the course of 11 years, there's players on all sides that have been involved in some very, very
Everyone,
poor.
I don't say everyone, and I can, We were in close contact with the majority of players who are relevant in this war, whether in the capacity of being a politician now or in the capacity of being a active service in every single organization you can imagine, agency you can imagine. We were all part of this. And when you asked me about how I felt in October 7th, I felt ashamed and I felt responsible. Okay. So even though I pioneered for this, we advocated for this, we traveled all corners of the earth, talked with us, we alarmed, we warned everyone, but we felt responsibility. This is the responsibility of a generation. Okay. So I know, in a political context, when you talk to anyone who wants to have a go and and his sort of political agenda, this is a very important conversation to be made. But when talking into reality, what we say in Israel, tachlis, the facts on the ground, when you go to this organization, to this conversation and discussion, you have to understand this is a responsibility that we all should take upon us and we should all learn from. The symbol of Hadar Goldin, it was once a symbol for 9 years, a victory for a terrorist organization. My hope is that you will look at him now as a symbol of victory for the Jewish people, to remember that leaving a soldier or a civilian behind is never an option for us. And we need to take care for each other. And, for any family in other contexts, sort of facing this situation in the future, I hope not this situation, but any hardship, it will be, as we grow old, there will be a sort of a granddad or a grandmother pointing to a grandchild saying, don't worry, he will be brought back. Look at Hadar Goldin. Eventually, they all fought for him. So this is my hope. This is a symbol of victory.
Before I let you go here, what's one thing about your dear brother Hadar that hasn't been talked about as much you think is a outstanding quality that people can remember, but something that hasn't been written or talked about as much?
I think the most simplest thing we take for granted, I think, our daily life, relationships and people we get in contact with. Hadar was an amazingly, I wouldn't say accommodating, because this is sort of limiting it, but there are certain people that you sit with and feel sort of embraced, empowered. This was Hadar with his smile, there's a lot of things to say about him. He was an educator, he was an artist, he was a very, very successful officer, commander in combat. But the first and foremost, it was his first, contact with a person, allowing everybody to feel empowered. And I think this is a secret for all of us these days, as we need to think of a very stronger future for our next generations. And I believe this nation and our people are up to incredible things for the whole world to be proud of. So there's a lot to come. We only need to believe in ourselves and empower each other.
Tzur Goldin, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm very happy for you and your family and Hadar's neshama that you're able to now talk about this ordeal in the past tense, that Hadar has been returned for a proper burial, and that, God willing, your family can continue to make a very positive difference on the future of the Jewish people. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much.